Hello, everybody. Thank you to the Corporate Governance Institute for the invitation to speak today, and also thank you to all of you in the room.
Yes, please.
It's an absolute privilege to present at this conference, surrounded by peers and professionals who understand the weight and the quiet power of what good governance makes possible. Say the word governance in most rooms and you feel the air change. People think rules, red tape, resistance, a quiet function, a necessary burden, but they're wrong. Governance isn't grey, it isn't slow, it's not stuck. At its best, it's an act of leadership, a quiet, deliberate form of courage, a promise made behind closed doors to protect what matters most. It's not just policy, it's principle. In the last year alone, we've watched listed companies backpedal on their ESG commitments, high-profile resignations following internal governance failures, and employee walkouts triggered by cultural blind spots. What links them all is not a lack of strategy, it's a lack of oversight, not bad intentions, but missed questions. Governance isn't about controlling outcomes, it's about shaping conditions. The companies that have weathered those reputational storms, they weren't perfect, they were prepared. Because someone, somewhere in the system, had the grit to ask, are we sure this is right? To those of you who carry that responsibility, company secretaries, governance professionals, you may not always have the loudest voice in the room, but you often carry the clearest one. We don't chase the limelight, we hold the line. But we are no longer backstage, we are centre stage. And yes, it's pressure, but it's also privilege. Because in a world that rewards speed, your job is to pause, to challenge, and to steady the course. The future of governance will not be defined by checklists, but by courage, by a willingness to speak up when silence is easier, to prioritise long-term resilience over short-term optics. That's not compliance, that's leadership. We've seen boards refuse to water down ethical sourcing commitments. Chairs demand that culture stays on the agenda all year round, and governance professionals calling time on practices that no longer serve. These aren't grand gestures, these are acts of stewardship. So let's stop apologising for governance. Let's own it. Governance isn't rules, silence, or back office. It's resolve, it's strength, it's the backbone of an organisation. And it starts not with new systems, but with bold people like you. And now we move from the monologue to the conversation. Governance with Grit is a panel that I'm pleased to host. The voices who've lived the complexities of governance and learned from it. They faced the difficult cause, seen systems under strain, and stayed with the questions that matter most. In fact, I've captured many of these stories and real-world examples and insights in my book, which you might want to have a read to explore them further. But let's begin. Please let me welcome my panellists. Julian Badley, Group Company Secretary of National Grid, sat in the middle. To the right of him is Darren Barnett, Senior Assistant COSEC at GSK, and to the left is Lucy Glover, Deputy Company Secretary at Smiths Group. So, to start off this panel discussion, I'm really keen to have a conversation with everyone about what it really means to make an impact. I know that every single one of you has a story and has made impact in your own organisations or over the course of your employment and your career. But to kick off, I'd really like to ask the question, why do people outside the profession see governance as dry or bureaucratic rather than as a strategic force for good? Darren, I was wondering if you wanted to start us off.
Sure. I think it comes from a fundamental lack of understanding. People on the outside who don't understand what we do. obviously our profession is over 130 years old, and it was purely an administrative box-ticking profession. But as the landscape in which organizations have had to navigate, it's become increasingly complex. So is our role, and more is expected of us. There's greater spotlight on scrutiny, accountability, and transparency. So you could say that we are strategic advisors now. But I think even though our profession is recognized in legislation, I don't think social attitudes have managed to catch up with that, and I think there isn't enough being done to sort of market ourselves out there. So in comparison to, say, other professions, like chartered professions, like chartered accountancy, that's a well-established profession, everyone knows what they do. So I think there's a lot more we can do internally to sort of bolster what we do externally.
Wonderful. And Lucy, I know that you have kind of a similar sort of train of thought around the profession. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think governance is just, and company secretary is just not really understood very well when you speak to someone, someone asks you what you do. So, I'm sure everyone has this, where do you start? And so I try to bring it to life with examples of the work we do. So I work with the board and committees, I organise the AGM, I lead on share plans. So really trying to bring it to life, because I just don't think people have really either heard of it, and if they hear the word secretary, they might think it is more administrative, which we know it's not.
Wonderful. And moving on to the next question. So I'm really keen to get behind how people start to see this and what the real story is. So my kind of next question to the panel is, can you share a time governance made a real difference that others noticed? And what was that change, and how did it change others' perceptions of yourself or of governance, and who noticed you, and what lessons could people in the audience take away today? Maybe Julian, you might want to start.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually thinking about this session on my way in, and I think grit is sometimes defined as courage, resilience, determination, and nothing says those things like 300 company secretaries on a 38-degree day in the middle of Hammersmith. So well done, everyone. We're almost halfway there, I think, in terms of the mission that we're on. I think on that first question and linking it to the second, it's not a professional problem, it's almost a comparison problem. Like in my job, I don't see lots of people going, oh, the finance team are really exciting. It's like we almost feel that we have more to prove because, to Lucy's point, it's perhaps a little bit less clear around what we do. And I guess when you have those moments to join the dots, I think you will hear that expression probably 15 times over the next 2 days, but that's the really unique position that I think company secretaries are in across a whole number of disciplines, regardless of size of firm. So for me, for example, working on things like a CEO transition, I think I've done sort of 5 of them now in my career. When I rock up at an organisation, I think come as like the Grim Reaper almost. The CEO's like, oh gosh, here we go. But I think demonstrating how you can work across contract, reward, incentives, IR, comms, and almost do that on your own in a standalone sense, people really go, oh right. And again, early in my career, that whole jack of all trades, master of none, I really beat myself up about that a little bit. But actually, you're a master of a whole lot. And those moments that you get to do that, they progress through your career. You get less of them as you get more senior, but they get bigger. And you've got to be there and you've got to deliver in those moments. And actually, the way we all navigate our careers and the options and opportunities that we have to us in this profession because of its breadth, those opportunities, I think, are there for all of us.
Lucy, did you want to chime in?
Yeah. So for me, one of these moments was leading on ESG. So I noticed in the business that no one had taken the initiative that, there's all this ESG regulation coming down the line, and people were asking me, what should we do? So I was proactive and stepped in and set up an ESG regulation oversight group full of senior leaders, cross-functional, so we could all work together because it is such a massive topic. And one of the things that I think COSECs do well is, we understand legislation and we can make it really simple for people. And the business really appreciate that. They really value it. Also, just being enthusiastic. I was quite passionate about ESG regulations. And so, once you're passionate about something, you can get your stakeholders on board, really engage people. So that's one part of it as well. And so my advice to everyone is, if you see an area that needs attention, be proactive, step in and, help the business because they really will value that support from you.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think, Darren, you have the flip side of the coin, so the maybe more interesting, not so great governance and what that's taught you.
Yeah, so I used to work for an organisation a couple of years ago. And it was notably going through a period of financial turmoil. It was a direct result of an overzealous CEO with an unsustainable risk appetite and just an unrealistic expansion strategy. For context, it was listed in the US, and I was only COSEC for EMEA, so a lot of direction and control was coming from America.
Yep.
The CEO in question was ousted before my time, but what was interesting is I could see the lasting damage and impact of his decisions. The company was just struggling throughout my entire time that I was there. On my first day, I shouldn't laugh, but there was redundancy rounds, and one of which was my boss, and she was based in the States. She was gone the next day. And you could just sense that bankruptcy was looming. And what I took away from it was, because I used to look after the subsidiary boards, the parent wanted the subsidiary boards to do things that I wasn't particularly comfortable with, nor with the directors. And it was sort of getting to a point where I was at conflict with my own principles, and obviously a lot of what we do is principles-based. So in the end, I resigned because I just couldn't sort of go down that route anymore. The company was going down a path that I just intrinsically disagreed with. So my key learning from that, and it was quite invaluable being in a company where you saw bad governance in action because it really helps you appreciate what good governance is. But I think a key learning is to just acknowledge the constraints of your own influence. We're there to guide and advise, not to dictate and control. So if it gets to a point where you think, I cannot do this anymore, it's just so much easier to walk away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't agree more. And as governance assessor of the Post Office inquiry, it very much feels like there are points in people's careers where you just have to go, I'm out. I cannot kind of support this. Obviously, I'm not in the Post Office. I'm working for the inquiry team, but it is an interesting point because you're absolutely right. Integrity is absolutely key to doing the role well, and it's an intrinsic part of doing it. So, to move on with the questions, I'm really keen, and I'm sure all of you in the audience, definitely the panel, are keen to see governance move from the back office to centre stage. I think it's already there if you want it to be there. But question to you guys up here is, what helps governance professionals to step up as leaders? That doesn't necessarily mean moving up job titles within an organisation, but it could be, because I think we can all be leaders in whatever role that we play. And how do we bring our kind of key stakeholders on that journey with us? So that could be kind of governance teams, it could be the board, it could be other stakeholders. I don't know, Julian, if you wanted to kick off?
Yeah, so I think over time, you'll have all heard this. People say the problem is that COSECs are really bad at promoting themselves. And I understand that, and you'll have all heard about personal brands and been on those sorts of seminars and all that sort of thing. And I think that, if you go in the next day and go, right, I'm here, and you're totally different from how you were yesterday, people will be like, God, he's lost his mind, rather than he's really working on his personal brand. So I tend to think about it very simply and in 3 steps. And I think COSECs forget about the 3rd step. And it varies in different stages of career, but I think that we're very good listeners. And I think we sometimes forget to ask the board what they want. So we go into jobs and we think, I'm going to modernize the report and accounts. Great. Did you ask anybody if that's what they wanted? Like, what do the board want? Second thing is deliver it, and deliver it well. And you'll obviously have your own views and your own agendas. But forgetting to ask early is something I've seen a lot. And then the third bit is the promotion bit. Once you've delivered it, tell the board you've done it. And that's the bit we all forget. And that's not actually promotion, it's just common sense. But how often do you get that chance, whether it's through your COSEC report to the board, in your one-to-one with the chair, one-to-one with the CEO, one-to-one with the COSEC, depending on where you are, how your structure is, to actually go through what you've done. And I think that is something that, really helped me at some sort of pivotal moments. So listen, deliver, tell.
And Darren, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think corporate secretariat in general have like a unique position within an organisation. We sit at the heart of everything.
Yeah.
So it's very rare in a large organisation that another function can do or deliver something without our input or guidance. So I think leveraging those opportunities to do a good job and making a difference. So obviously with tax, treasury, finance, the possibilities are endless. But I always say, the reward for good work is more work. It's repeat business, isn't it? So, and I mean, in addition to that, I think you mentioned earlier about COSECs being strategic advisors, so that would follow that we should adopt a strategic mindset. So developing a deep understanding of your organization's goals and risks and how governance best practices can be aligned with those goals. So I think, those are really key ideas in stepping up and to be leaders.
Amazing. And Lucy, I know you've got some big experience of demergers. Can you give us some insights?
Yeah. So one thing that is to really be on centre stage is to sort of work outside your area of expertise. So get involved in things that you wouldn't normally see as COSEC. So the ESG regulation piece, I was helping the ESG team. I'm really into AI and how we can promote that through the legal team. And currently, I'm now project manager of, we're selling one of our businesses, a sale or demerger, and I'm project managing that. So, and it, not only is it, it really interesting doing all of this work that's sort of outside the general day-to-day COSEC work, it does, improve your reputation because people realise that you can do things that are not just COSEC related. And as part of that, you shouldn't forget the transferable skills that you have. You arrange AGMs, you work with the board, you've got really good trusted relationships, which you can bring into different projects. So, for example, the work I'm doing on the sale demerger, I've worked with the boards, I sort of know what they like to see, so I can help there as well. So it's not just project management, it's bringing other expertise and advice to that team.
I think,
Yeah, of course.
when you, the biggest privilege I feel in my job, when you're doing it well, what's amazing about being as you're progressing, Neds will talk to you, will phone you for like quite tactical advice. I'm going to deal in shares, what's my portfolio, is it discretionary, non-discretionary, can we do this, can we do that? Quite a good barometer, I think, is when you're doing your job really well, they just call you and say, oh, this is going on here, what do you think? Or in my other company, that's happened, what do you think? Or, I'm going sailing tomorrow, what do you think? Or whatever. And they're the calls where you're like, oh, God, that's half of my life, I'm not going to get back. Half an hour of my life, I'm not going to get back. But what you learn in those conversations is incredible. And it goes a little bit to the last session where, the VUCA acronym, and a lot of the stuff and the conversations we're involved in is much less tangible than it probably used to be. And it's subjective, and it's about viewpoint, and it's about experience, and what have you seen before, and how have those things played out, and how have you managed it. And, being part of that, being central to that with the board, I think is always quite a good indicator of, are you bringing something that's of interest, of relevance, and something that is going to be ultimately, helpful, beneficial, add shareholder value or whatever. But those intangibles really do, and those periods of uncertainty of which we are massively in, really do open the door for company secretaries in a way that it was similar 2008 in the financial crisis. It was similar again during COVID. And it's very similar now because of the political situation. So I wouldn't wish many of those events back on us for the sake of professional gain, but you can kind of see that pattern, and it does operate in cycles.
Absolutely. And I suppose the other thing, of course, is that I'm sure you do this, Julian, when you talk to the board and to different board members or whoever they may be, it's talking to people with the insights of what they are going to find insightful. Yeah. So your finance director is going to have a very different view to what they want to know about as opposed to your CEO or your NED or your chair or someone in finance, for instance. So it's kind of working out what language it is that they speak, and essentially, as I say, almost like a palette of paints is kind of how I see things. Some people have a language that's red or yellow or orange or blue or purple or whatever it might be, or any shade in between, and it's working out what will resonate with them, because that's what will get your message heard. Think about what it is that they understand and they appreciate and they're trying to achieve, and kind of link your message so that it fits in with that. So moving forward and looking at what the future demands, if we want to be moving, or if we're not already, centre stage, then what do we actually need to start thinking about? So in order to increase impact and get noticed, I'm interested to hear from you three about an example of when you've done that, when you've actually kind of raised the profile of the profession, or any thoughts you might have around how we can all do that together, because arguably it's not a one-person thing. If everybody does it together, then, as I say, when the tide rises, all the boats rise with it. And that's something that I think is really important. So I suppose maybe Lucy, you can start with that question.
So this is about sort of, as I've mentioned before, working outside your area. So really getting a breadth to your role, so you understand the commercial and the strategic part of the business, and being really curious and just finding out more. And then you can really understand the business. So when you are asked that question, you can give a good opinion. Maybe they're not, may be a different opinion to them, but you feel you're informed. You've given them an informed opinion. And I think as we mentioned, the board are more and more becoming under increasing pressure for different events. So you've got cyber incidents, geopolitical. So there's lots of different challenges the board are facing. And so to upskill yourself in different areas, you can really add value when they do ask you questions and what your thoughts and opinions are on different things. So that's my
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. And Darren?
I think education is probably an important one, because I feel like a lot of governance professionals, they stumble into this profession. I myself did. I didn't know what a company secretary was until I did my first corporate governance master's degree. And I was absolutely livid to find out there was a chartered version, which I ended up doing anyway. But I feel like sort of mentoring really helps. And I think we are going in the right direction, because, like I said, I didn't find out about this profession until much later in my career, but I get messages on LinkedIn from people in sixth form, people in the first year of university. So I think really pushing forward with that narrative and answering their questions and providing mentorship. So I've mentored a few students. Some have gone on to do COSEC, some haven't, but you never know. Like I said, they might come back to it. But I feel like education and really raising awareness early on would really raise our profile.
Absolutely. It's been an advocate, isn't it, for the industry as a whole. Julian, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I love the word curious that Lucy used, because it basically means really nosy in a COSEC sense. But if you go into an interview and say I'm really nosy, it probably doesn't get you the same, get the same opportunities if you say I'm really curious. People sort of tend to not notice the distinction, but I think that that's always a characteristic of a good COSEC. Again, it goes back to the joining the dots point. I guess for me, what makes you impactful, gets you noticed, but also supports the governance function and your team, I think would be two things. One's sort of a work one, and one's a sort of personal or leadership style one. So the first is be technically strong, bring strong judgment and diverse experience. I think it makes you more interesting, and it makes you be able to help in lots of different situations. We're always learning, so you don't expect to have done everything. But I think it goes to the curiosity, and being able to do that. It gives you a foundation at the table, the technical part. And I guess from a leadership point, I think, taking a risk is important at some point in your career. You hear yourself saying to people, make a lateral move, and they kind of roll their eyes and they're like, well, yeah, but I want to go up, not to the side. And I think it gives you real credibility if you've done it yourself, rather than just can talk about perhaps someone else doing it. And actually a risk sometimes is not necessarily jumping and going to do another job. A risk sometimes might be staying in your own job but doing something slightly different. Lots of co-secs get to the job because they've got long tenured service, someone said to me once, co-secs know where the bodies are buried, largely because they buried them. And I always thought that was quite interesting. But your perspective on risk and what that means, I think, is important. But there's a real risk in this profession. You hit a glass ceiling. Like, you move once every 2 or 3 years, you get to deputy level, and it is really hard to get your first co-sec job. So you think you're doing really well, but you're actually just amassing the same experience as everyone else and moving horizontally. And it gets to a point in your life where you're like, oh, actually moving laterally now really is difficult because of family or because of financial commitments or because of your life plan. So when are you going to do that? And I think from a leadership point of view, for me, some of my team are here, so they might tell me I'm talking rubbish, but being able to really talk credibly about when you made lateral moves, what did you do, what risk did you take, I think is really important.
I think you're absolutely right. And to be fair, I seem to be the queen of job hopping.
Yeah.
Don't look
Now
at
an
the CV,
author.
anyone. Thank you very much, Julian.
Now you can look higher.
But yeah, it is. I was told by a recruiter very early on in my career that it was really important to get that deep level of knowledge rather than that shallow level of knowledge, because you'll rise to a point and you may have people that you are line managing, or, as I was, a one-of-one in a FTSE as group co-sec and head of legal, and there is no one to look at other than yourself, and you don't know how to file a form at Companies House. You have a big problem, and you can't outsource that to the lawyers, that's for sure. Someone will definitely be questioning why you're spending money on all these external services for filling out forms. But to come to my kind of final question, then hopefully we'll have some time for a couple of questions. What's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger governance professional self? Let's come to you first, Darren.
I'd probably say embrace your authentic self from the outset. I mean, I'm an out and proud gay man at work. And when I first started out, there wasn't really a role model that I could look up to, so I sort of had to become my own. I think I'm breaking the mold as I sit here in a silk blouse amongst the sea of suits. It's just really sort of, I wish I'd just had that confidence to sort of embrace myself much earlier, because I feel like in the boardroom and things like that, it really does wonders for dynamics. People always talk about dynamics between the board, but I think, as a strategic advisor, the dynamics between the co-sec and the board are really important as well. And I think because I'm proud of who I am, it's really helped me help foster good relationships with not just board members, but stakeholders as well.
And Julian?
Yeah, and good for you,
Thank you.
Darren. I think three things. So find someone that believes in you. I've been so lucky in my career to have found 4 or 5 people that truly believed in me, would cover me when I made stupid mistakes, and they unlock more doors for you than you'll ever know. And I am a strong believer in investing in relationships, staying in companies, doing a good job, and those people, they become champions for you as you move on. I think the second thing is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And if I'd have given myself that advice, probably 5 years ago, you hate the person that says that to you. It's the most annoying bit of advice, because you're like, oh yeah, it's fine for you to say, you're where you are and I want to get there and all of that sort of thing. But there's moments for breadth and there's moments for depth, and you need to be really, everyone's careers are different, but depending on what you want to do, I think for everybody, there are moments where breadth and depth are important, and you need to be thinking about a medium-term horizon to think about where they are. And the final thing is, don't drink too much and dance badly at the CGI Awards.
Oops.
this industry is incredibly small and well networked, and that is a fabulous, fabulous thing. That's why you do these sorts of sessions, because actually, people aren't just going to disappear off and go off into their, very disparate, diverse kind of subsections of finance or law or whatever. We sort of know what each other do, and I've had, I think, 5 jobs in COSEC, and only once did I not know the person interviewing me. And that's kind of both brilliant, but also, take those relationships with you, build those relationships, build that network, because it's so circular, and you can massively use that. It can be a massive advantage, I think, both from a professional, but also from a boardroom perspective as well, because they are more diverse than they've ever been, but you come across the same people a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy?
So my advice would be proactive. So all of the opportunities that have come my way haven't just sort of landed in my lap. I've gone out and, made it known what I'd like to be involved in, just sort of got involved. And so my advice for younger self is also to speak to your manager and make it known what you're keen to be involved in and what you're not, so they can help you with a development program that fits what you want to do. So, so for example, even speaking at this conference, a couple of years ago, I contacted this CDI to say, I want to give a bit back. Can I get involved in anything? These are the topics I could help you with. And then, here I am. So again, it's just being proactive and making the effort.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know if anyone has any questions in the audience. I can just about see you in front of all the lights, but no one...
Go for it. Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for everyone with Slido. I'm going to elide a couple of these Slido questions for you, and it's going to be a bit of a bouncer for all of you, so I hope it's not too bad. Katie asked, what is this pushback on what the governance team has been asked to deliver? And somebody else asked, have you ever observed ethical blindness, and how did you address it with the board? I'm going to mix that together with another question, which was, what was your best corporate governance moment in your career? And say, when did you feel that you had to show the grit that Erika's been talking about? Can you think of a moment where there was that question about ethics, or there was that question about pushback, and you had to demonstrate good governance grit?
Ooh, okay. So obviously when I was talking about, I'm not going to say the organisation I worked at, but when I basically had to shout at legal and head office to say, leave the board members alone, stop trying to make them breach their duties. And then it worked for a short while.
There's a lot in that. I think it's 2 things. I think I've never had anyone say to me, but that's not what the company secretary does. And I did have that said to me when I worked in a law firm. And I don't know why that, in a law firm, and I had a fantastic time when I worked in a law firm, but you do hear the term exit stage left. It's like, you've done that, now you're done, and actually you need to move on to the other thing. I feel very privileged for that and very proud of that. And I think there's something about how you bring yourself to the table and the experience that you've got, your curiosity, your energy, how you can show judgment and say, oh, I heard X talking about that the other day. Is that relevant? How does it piece together? And then I think from a grit point of view, again, just from a leadership perspective, I remember to this day the first time I had a team working for me and they asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to. And I rambled for about 10 minutes, hoping that I'd kind of get to the answer, or they'd get bored and think I'd answered, or forget the question they asked. And I think courage, resilience, determination just displays itself in so many different ways all the time in our days, weeks, whatever, careers. And it's just leaning into those. I think sometimes not being afraid to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. and you're often, I guess, goes back full circle, you know, you're given the time, I think as co-secs, you're given the time to do that because whatever you've been asked really is generally quite important.
I think as co-secs, we shouldn't underestimate how much influence we have. So all this ESG regulation work, and I went and did a postgraduate certificate at Cambridge, and I thought maybe I want to move into ESG. And then as I did this course, I realised how much power and influence we have as company secretaries, and I could actually influence what we did in terms of ESG from my current job. So I think that's something you should take away, is that actually, you join the dots, and if there's any issues, if you've got really good stakeholder management and you can influence in the background, you can help, when there are issues, you're there to manage it gracefully.
Erika, have you noticed that Darren gave us a shouting match and then Julian and Lucy gave us very general answers, which are very useful, but avoided talking about specific moments of conflict. Erika, what about you?
So I've been in a number of boardrooms where I think ethics have been pushed to the limit, where cash has been run very, very dry, and where decisions have been taken that did not align with my own personal ethics. For instance, let's just say diverting executive pay so year end was 31st of December, saying that the December pay for all the executives, which was a massive chunk of money, was going to be diverted to being paid 1st of January, so it didn't turn up in the annual accounts, therefore skewed the numbers, and I have many other examples. At that point, you have to draw the line, you have to say, not on my watch, I cannot continue to work for this organisation, and you have to just take that stand. Earlier on in my career, there was a whistleblowing opportunity for me to take when I'd only actually been qualified for 9 months or so, and I took the decision. There was some shenanigans between pension fund and the main board, and both were kind of in cahoots, but the independent trustees on the pension fund were unaware, and there were various tactics to ensure that the deficit that was in the pension fund was never going to be paid by the PLC. And again, I sat in that room and I spoke to a couple of people that had trained me and just said, what should I do? I'm so junior, I could blow the whistle on this, but no one's going to care, and my job is potentially going to be shot down anyway. So what happens? The people that know it's happening, and those that don't know it's happening, do they care? And so I actually took the idea of kind of silent quitting. So I did. I left very quickly after and said, I'm not having anything to do with this. And when they asked me for an exit interview, I said, I don't think that's necessarily something you want to have on your HR record, but feel free if you wish to do so. I will be 100% open with you. And that is that. So yeah, there are challenges being a governance professional and remaining ethical and standing by your own principles, but that is the job that we do. And if people don't want to listen, then you have to make a decision as to whether you still want to remain working with those people. Yeah.
That's the very definition of grit, I think, isn't it? When you're prepared to put yourself on the line like that. Erika, we've got time just for a very quick upsum from you. What do you take out of the panel yourself, and what can the folks take away?
I would say that the whole governance with grit piece, it starts with every single person in the room. It kind of starts with authenticity, being principled, and being able to be that quiet voice at times, being that loud voice at other times. But let's kind of raise the profile of the governance profession together, because we're all here, we're all in it together. We may be one of one, as I have been many times in previous roles, but together we have a much stronger voice. And I say, let's all work together to keep driving the profile of governance.
Fantastic. Erika, panel, thank you very much indeed for taking us through to lunch. Round of applause for the panel.